So your teachers asked you to take a look at an argument essay. I have one here about pennies. This might be familiar to some of you, not all. But let's take a look at what we're talking about subject-wise. I've got a picture here of a penny. I love the shiny penny. Nothing better than a shiny penny. I know this is going to seem weird, but at one time, people sometimes stuck them in their shoes. They put them in their loafers, and they were called penny loafers. I know, it's weird. It's a thing. It might come back, so be ready for it. All right, so the article begins with this picture, and I'm going to zoom in here so we can all see it. There's a kid. He's gone to the store. He's buying himself an Xbox, but rather than paying cash, he's dragged out every penny he seems to own, and he's counted out, these thousands of pennies it's taking to buy the Xbox. Some of you might think that this is kind of rude or obnoxious. Personally, I would say that this is actually a great example of being. That's right. Pennywise. Awesome job by this kid of putting his money into play. So, sorry for the scary moment there. Look, Pennywise isn't really scary. He's just misunderstood. Let's get into the real topic at hand, which is, of course, about this article, this essay dealing with pennies and whether we should keep them or not. There are two ideas you really got to have your head around, though, as I go through the article. The first is about the word logic, and the other one is about the word relevant or relevance. And I'm going to explain logic right here. So you see a little puzzle picture. If you think about this, it's pretty simple. There's one piece left. Logically, where does that piece go? Obviously, you're going to take the white piece and fill in the last of the blue, and you'll have this perfect picture of whiteness. No idea why you want that. Maybe you're into the Beatles. I don't know. But what you really need to understand about logic is it's a way to drive people towards an answer. For example, it uses what we call this if-then type of arguing. If you agree that human lives are valuable, it would make sense then to always wear your seatbelt, right? Believe it or not, at one time, grown men, and I think some women, they went up to the Hill, they went to Washington, D.C., and they argued the opposite. They actually said that seatbelts were unnecessary and that Americans needed the freedom to, drive around without any seatbelts on. You, of course, know now that this is not a very good idea at all, but it took a lot of logical arguing to get people up there to understand that, yes, it really was to their benefit to have seatbelts. So logic is about leading people to an answer that just makes so much sense you can't help it, like the final piece that goes into that white puzzle. Where else can it go? The other idea is about being relevant or relevance. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm talking to a buddy of mine, and I explained to him how I just lost my pet, and I'm pretty upset about it, and I really don't know where the pet is, and he hasn't been back in like a month. Very upsetting. Major bummer, right? He says to me, I once lost a soccer game. What? That doesn't connect or make any sense. I mean, sorry you lost a soccer game, but come on, how does that even compare to someone losing their pet and being very upset about that? So the idea here is when we talk about things that are relevant in an argument, you have to make sure that what you're reading or what you're putting in your own argument, it does relate very closely and it makes a lot of sense to what you're talking about. And we're going to see that in this article, which I'm going to jump into and I'm going to read, and I'm going to be a little quick because I have to go through this with some speed. Should we get rid of the penny? The truth about America's most controversial coin. So here's the idea. Do we keep the penny or do we get rid of pennies? It sounds like this will be an actual fair discussion. There'll be reasons for keeping it or getting rid of it, and then there'll be reasons for keeping it. Back in the good old days, you could treat yourself to a candy feast for just a few cents. In the early 1900s, all sorts of sweets, licorice, hard candies, bubblegum, cost only a penny each. Today, though, a penny won't get you much of anything, except perhaps good luck if you find one on the ground. Vending machines don't accept them, and using them to pay for stuff is a hassle. Who would lug 1,000 pennies to the movies when they could bring a $10 bill? Plus, pennies are time-consuming. According to a 2012 study, the average American spends 2.4 hours per year handling them, counting them and sorting them for payment or change. No wonder many Americans think we should get rid of the 1-cent coin altogether. Millions of dollars. American pennies are born in the U.S. Mint, the government agency that makes all our coins. Oddly, it costs the mint more than a penny to produce a penny. First, there's the cost of the zinc and copper the metal pennies are made of. Then there is the cost of running the mint, which includes maintaining machines and paying the people who work there. Add it all up, and the government loses half a cent for each of the billions of pennies it produces every year, only to have most of those coins end up lost behind furniture, tossed into fountains, or stashed away in jars. If we stopped making pennies, taxpayers would save millions of dollars a year. Then there's the fact that making pennies wastes zinc and copper. These metals are important natural resources that can be found in many common items: sunscreen, laptops, batteries, and washing machines. Shouldn't we limit our use of zinc and copper to products that people actually use? Okay, nice question. So I'm going to pull this apart a little bit, and I've marked it up. The beginning part of this discussion, should we keep the penny? It kind of talks about how, look, pennies a long time ago, they were valuable in the sense they could buy us things easily. Today, not so much. I marked that in red because, in my opinion, it's a decent argument, but it's not a particularly amazing argument for why we should keep the penny or not. Their argument gets stronger in the next section. It becomes more relevant and logical. They say, for example, vending machines don't accept them at all. Now, when I think about that, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if a machine that I want to get some gum from or soda or whatever won't take my pennies, that's not a very helpful thing to me to have pennies. So maybe they're not worthwhile. I underline the word "and" because it's a second point they're making in the same sentence. Using them to pay for stuff is just a hassle. It's kind of true. I mean, I hate digging around for pennies. I don't really like to do that too much, but once in a while, it's okay. And then it says, who would lug 1,000 pennies to the movies when they could bring a $10 bill? Absolutely true. That is too much of a nuisance. Plus, pennies are time consuming. As they explain, you have to stack them, sort them, and go looking through them. Now, I put that section in yellow down here in the left-hand corner because these are decent arguments. They're all relevant. They're even logical. But is there anything that really has strong proof for it? Not as much as the next paragraph, where they bring in some actual data. There was a 2012 study that showed that most Americans spend 2.4 hours a year handling money, pennies, counting, sorting them, looking for them, whatever. So that to me is a better use or better way to support the argument that pennies are not worthwhile. It continues later. Middle column, millions of dollars. Oddly, it costs the mint more than a penny to produce a penny. Okay, good argument. I mean, that's factual. That's very relevant to me to know that it costs more than a penny to make a penny. And it goes on later. I have the little arrow here, and it explains how really taxpayers would save millions of dollars if we didn't have to create the penny anymore because of what's used in that. I've underlined some things with a kind of pencil mark in gray because these are good signal words or transition words you should always pay attention to. Then, and, plus, those types of things. Let's get back in here. Later on, I boxed, if we stop making pennies, taxpayers would save millions of dollars. So there's some great relevant support. It's really relevant to me because I pay taxes. And I'm sure your parents would agree also. Then there is the fact that making pennies wastes zinc and copper. And it talks about how these items are used a lot for things like washing machines and laptops. And yes, of course, they're in pennies, but they're a limited resource. They're not going to last forever. And so if we're using them to create something that's maybe a hassle and costing us a lot of money anyway, it seems like a big waste. Is that a relevant argument? Absolutely. Is it a logical argument? Yeah. I mean, if I only have so much of a resource and I'm using it for something that maybe isn't helping society too much, the penny, maybe I shouldn't be using it so much for that purpose and stick to things like washing machines and laptops that I know people really do use quite a bit. Okay, let's get into the next part. But before you start down with the penny rail in your school cafeteria, keep in mind that without pennies, things could get more expensive. Why? Prices would have to be rounded to the nearest nickel. For example, let's say you can get a hot dog for $1.97. Without the penny, the hot dog vendor would likely raise the price to $2 rather than lower it to $1.95. That might not sound bad, but those pennies increases add up. Then again, Canada minted its last 1 cent coin in 2012, and prices there have not gone up enough to cause problems. All right, annotated. I underline but. But is a super critical word in our language. Always pay attention to it. Whenever somebody uses that word, they are countering or changing what they've said before. For example, my son asked me, hey, can I go driving today? Sure, you can go drive today, but now he knows something's going to change in that. Yeah, he can go driving, but there's something else to that. Maybe I make him take out the trash. Maybe I make him fill up the gas tank. Maybe I tell him to be home at a certain time. All right, here we go. I put a red box around this because red to me is not a great argument. Before you start down with the penny rallying your school, keep in mind that without penny, things could get more expensive. Prices would have to be round to the nearest nickel. They pick an example, $1.97. Sure, somebody's going to round that up to $2. That makes sense to me. But on the other hand, they could round it down if they wanted to, right? And most people don't price things at $1.97. They actually do like $1.99 or they do $2. And if you're going from $1.99 to $2, is that a big difference? I mean, does that have a major impact on you and your wallet? Not so much. So this type of arguing, while it's not bad to explain why we should keep the penny, it's also not particularly great. So let's see if they get better at it. It comes down later. That might not sound bad, but those tiny increases could add up. Okay, maybe. I don't know that I agree with that though. Then again, I underline that transition word. It's kind of like but. It's like on the one hand or the other hand. I'm saying pennies, if we got rid of them, everything becomes more expensive. But then again, Canada actually got rid of their 1 cent item back in 2012, and it really didn't have an impact on prices going up much. So this is more proof and really, really good evidence that maybe the penny can go bye-bye. Let's see if we get anything on the other side of the argument. We're not getting very much here. And this is why I don't like this article too much. It's too lopsided for me. Cherish coin. Even though pennies seem useless, most Americans still want them around. A 2014 survey found that only 34% of adults wanted to get rid of them. Some cherish a penny because of who was on it. The 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, one of our country's most beloved leaders. Others are simply nostalgic about the penny. Perhaps it is not surprising that although many pennies ending bills have been presented to Congress, most recently in 2017, none have passed. Pennies do have one important use, though. They help charities. Penny drives are campaigns that ask for donations of pennies, and these campaigns are often big successes because so many people are willing to chip in such tiny amounts. Penny drives can provide much-needed funding for important causes. So a penny for your thoughts. Should the U.S. get rid of the penny? Now, like I said, I got a problem with this. This is the end of the article, and it's only a tiny section devoted to whether we should actually keep the penny. It's in favor of, yes, keep the penny. So let's begin. Even though pennies seem useless, most Americans still want them around. Notice how the writer kind of sets you up here. Even though they seem useless, most people do want to keep them around. So this is kind of them saying, let's keep them. Here's their support, which I put in green because it's decent. They got a survey that says that 34% of adults wanted to get rid of them. That's not everybody. 34% means there's a larger number of people that would like to keep them. Now, here's where it got a little weak for me. Some people want to keep it because of Abe Lincoln. Some just because they're nostalgic about it, meaning they have nice memories of pennies. These aren't great, relevant reasons to keep the penny. Not really. It says, perhaps it's not surprising that although the penny may, so a lot of bills have been put before Congress and not enough have been taken in. That's decent support. I mean, Washington hasn't moved on it, but it's not great support. They end with their best item of all. Really, this is the only great reason for keeping the penny that I saw in the entire article. They help with charities. Okay, they do. People take their change, especially their pennies, and they like to donate those quickly because it's not a big deal to them. All right, I got to wrap up super fast. I have very limited time. The bottom line is pay attention to what's relevant, what's logical. Look at terms and words, signal words. Think about facts, look at surveys, and judge the article for yourself. This wasn't a fair one. This is completely against the penny. They didn't really give a lot for the penny. Okay? I think you're good.